There we go. Okay. You're not going to pick up these bad coping techniques. But some people do, of course. They pick up the bad coping techniques. Poor people are more likely to use these coping techniques to try to dissipate the stress. People who feel that they do not have much control in their jobs tend to have a higher risk of heart disease. I think I talked about this last time. That's why I had my heart attack. I worked up until July, and then they fired me. They just fired me. They had already, or they claimed they had somebody to replace me, hired in my stead, and it turned out they didn't. It's not important. I was already gone by that time, so it's the way it works. Well, and I had a heart attack. Like 10 days after they fired me, I had a heart attack. Why did I have a heart attack? Because of the stress of not having any control over what was going on. Low levels of control are more generally associated with poor physical functioning and an increased likelihood of illness. And of course, if you get in a job where you feel like you're being manipulated by the whatever group you're dealing with, then you're more likely to suffer from that. You'll catch colds, you'll catch the flu, you'll get stomach problems. You'll spend a lot of time not working. And that's because your body is trying to tell you that you're in a situation that it doesn't like. So what you potentially need to do is start looking for a job where you don't get sick. I have, except for my heart attack, I've actually never been sick. I mean, it's really crazy.
Even in the medical field?
Yeah.
You were, oh.
Yeah. I'm immune to like everything. I know. So the flu comes in. You know, some new flu comes wandering through wherever I am, and I don't get it. Why not? Because, well, I came in contact with so much flu during my time as a lab tech that I'm immune to just about everything. I've been through hepatitis epidemics, flu epidemics that were killing people, and I've never gotten sick. It was worse than that. You know, when we were collecting specimens from the individuals coming in. These were kids. I was working in a pediatrics clinic, and we were collecting sputum specimens from these kids. And I had to take the sputum specimen and put it in a jar. So I literally came in contact with all 279 cases of flu that we had at that clinic. Literally. Not figuratively, not virtually, but literally. I came in contact with everything, and I never got sick. Now the nurses got sick. The doctor didn't get sick, but the nurses got sick. But I didn't get sick. And I handled every damn specimen. The nurses were only seeing whatever patients they were seeing, but I was seeing everybody. And I not only had to put it in jars, but I was also playing with the damn stuff. We were experimenting with a flu identification kit. So I not only had to play with it to put it in the jar, but I had to play with it in order to find out if that test was working. We had actually 3 tests that we were looking at. So I had to play with it 4 times, every sputum specimen. And we had, it was like 73% positive flu rate from all these kids that came in. They all had the flu. Almost all, well, 73% of them had the flu. Anyway, I didn't get sick. I was having a good time. As long as you enjoy your work, you're not going to get sick. I mean, that's just the way it works. One study by Lockman and Weaver in 1998 found that although lower socioeconomic status people have worse health outcomes, those with lower socioeconomic status who felt that they had much control in their lives had levels of health and well-being that were comparable with those in higher income groups. So that bossy lady that seems to be barking at everybody, that even though she's poor, she's probably going to stay relatively healthy as compared to the lady that cows in front of people. So you need to be as arrogant as you possibly can be, and then you're probably not going to get sick, no matter how much money you don't have. So go ahead. Be a son of a bitch. That's how you stay healthy. My mother lived to be 98 years old, and She grew up on a farm during the Depression, but she was a ass kicker. That was my mom, and she never got sick, even though she was a nurse at the hospital, took care of all the dying people.
So be arrogant so you don't have the low stress levels?
Right. Lowers your stress level. But watch your irritation level, because that'll raise your stress as well and give you a heart attack. Stress and feelings of lack of control tend to be more pronounced among those who occupy a subordinate position and are subject to the demands of those who are able to make decisions for them. And so the less people you have on bossing you around. And of course, I keep coming in contact with this. I'm just an instructor. I'm just a professor, a lowly professor. What does that mean? That means that I have a dean that is in charge of me. I have a provost that's in charge of me. President of the institution is in charge of me. So what I try to do is stay away from them. I try not to come in contact with them. And of course, this semester we don't have a dean since Sarah stepped down over the summer. So it's been a really non-stressful semester, despite the fact that I'm teaching 27 hours. I'm only supposed to be teaching 15. You would think I'd be stressed out to no end. If this computer hadn't kicked back on, I would have been in a whirl of hurt. And so would you guys, because I wouldn't have a copy of your papers. Actually, I could probably recover them. I haven't, if you've emailed them to me, I haven't gotten rid of those emails. So I could potentially recover them, potentially. Anyway, yeah, it's been a relatively non-stressful semester. It was fairly stressful last week, but then again, I had to drive 2 days to get to Iowa and then 2 days to get back. And the 2 days, yeah, I had 2 dogs and a cat in my car. The cat didn't make much noise, but I kept feeling responsible for the dogs. You know, dogs pee. People pee. I stopped at every rest stop, by God, and there's not enough rest stops between here and there. Those sons of bitches in Texas don't have rest stops. Do they, Jeff? They have one. There's one all the way across the panhandle. That sucks. Yeah, so whose fault is that? Well, it's Jeff's, obviously. He's from Texas. Thanks, Jeff.
Well, we can just go outside, take it.
You can't. Texas is flat. I could go a mile over there, and people are looking at me through their binoculars trying to figure out whether that's my finger or my penis. And all I'm trying to do is take a piss. I'm kidding. I hope I haven't offended you.
No.
Not yet? Okay. I'll work on it. This is not just true of humans. Research with various primates has revealed that those individuals who are subordinate in a hierarchy experience greater stress, hormone levels when the society is ruled by intimidation. So if we are in the Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union, where intimidation was being used, maybe Putin in Russia now, the intimidation. He's very anti-gay for some ungodly reason. But that seems to be a point of conflict in Russia now. And he's, of course, intimidation. Is it going off again?
So I thought it was
Okay. All right. Yeah. Ugly things happen with this thing. It's been screwing up lately. High stress hormones are especially true when the subordinate primates are unable to easily avoid dominant individuals and when they have low availability of social support. So it's not just me trying to hide from. And actually in this picture, there is one of these individuals dies right after this picture was taken. One of these individuals is killed. Yeah, it's not difficult to see which one is about to be pummeled to death by the other three. And these are chimpanzees, of course. Once upon a time, we thought the chimpanzees were like proto-humans. In other words, they were positive. They had more positive things about them. We were such violent creatures, and the chimpanzees weren't. And then we discovered, ooh, wait a minute, the chimpanzees are pretty damn vicious themselves. They not only killed this guy, but they ripped him apart and ate all of the meat. They tore him limb from limb, and they distributed the meat.
Well, if you watch the Planet of the Apes movies, it's pretty much the same thing, isn't it?
Well, that's the Planet of the Apes. That's a movie. That's fiction. This was real.
Oh, I know. I'm just,
Produced some god-awful things. Nature has some god-awful things in it. So sometimes when you're working for an organization, well, that may be the way that I felt, and that's why I had a heart attack at that other institution, at that other tribal college. They just decided that I should be gone, and despite the fact I was teaching more classes than anybody else and had more students than anybody else, they still got rid of me. And then they tore me limb from limb and devoured. That's kind of ugly. The societal features that result in the greatest degree of stress among subordinates in various primate populations are remarkably similar to the situation in which many low socioeconomic status people find themselves in modernized industrialized society. And of course, we have psychological personality theories that fit with this. The humanists believe that this is true, and they believe that some people are disenfranchised from society, and they feel disenfranchised. And that's one of the reasons why they have such negative results. And one of the negative results, of course, is early death, is poor health. So if the reality is that if we're dealing with a poor population, no matter what the group is, whether it's European American, African American, Hispanic, or Native American, one of the things that we will see is poor health with the poorer individuals in the group. And it's just a point of fact. And this has to do with humanism, with that concept that people react to the society, and the society doesn't care. Now, one of the interesting things about this administration, and you may not find this interesting at all, but one of the interesting things about this administration is that it seems to be more sensitive to organizations, to companies. They are dismantling the EPA and whatnot. Well, the EPA was put in place to protect the environment, an environmental protection agency. I mean, obviously. So who does that actually protect? Does that protect wealthy people, or does that protect poor people? Well, evidently it protects the poor people, not the wealthy people. So this administration seems to be ignoring the common man, these individuals. So potentially we're going to have a backlash from some of the things that this administration is doing, depending on what they are able to get done. Fascinating stuff. As a psychologist and as a political scientist, I am just completely fascinated with this. And I can't wait to find out what happens next. It looks like General Flynn is going to start talking to Mueller. Do you know General Flynn? He was a security advisor for like 2 weeks, and then they had to fire him because it turned out that he had contact with the Russians, not only the Russians, but the Turks. I know. Should be fascinating to watch. We'll see how this thing turns out. Feeling poor can matter as much as actually being poor. The experience of relative deprivation of knowing that others are doing better than you might lead to stress and its associated negative health consequences. And I think we talked about this last time. So it's the people that you run with. If you run with people that are poorer than you, then you're going to feel pretty damn good. But if you're running with people that are wealthier than you, despite the fact that you have a select amount of wealth, and we see this in high school kids all the time, individuals that are trying to keep up with their friends, trying to buy clothes to keep up with their friends. We all saw this in high school, where some individuals actually felt stressed out because their friends were all wealthier than they were. And of course, we see this in the movies from time to time, but the reality is it's true. So it's not where you fit in society as much as where you think you fit in society. The individuals that you run with, the individuals that are your friends. I went to an elite school, and there were a lot of individuals at that school that had a lot of money. But I ran track, and most of the people that I ran track with were not the wealthy kids. They were, they were the fast guys. And of course, if you have money, you don't have to be an athlete in order to be popular. All you have to do is be rich. There was one individual that came to school with 2 cars, which of course you guys are thinking, big deal, he had 2 cars. He had a Maserati and a Shelby Cobra, were the two cars that he had. So he had a roommate, and he let his roommate drive the other car. So anytime he was driving the Maserati, the roommate got to drive the Shelby Cobra. And anytime he was driving the Shelby Cobra, which wasn't very often, he liked the Maserati better. He was driving the other car. One of the first individuals I met there had a Ferrari. Well, you're thinking, wow, that's amazing. You know, I don't have a car at all, and this guy's got a car that's worth as much as my house is worth. You know, we owned a farm, and it was worth as much as our whole farm was worth. So here's this guy that has all this money. But they weren't my friends. As it turned out, they went into fraternities. All these wealthy kids went into fraternities, and I was an independent. And most of my friends were poorer kids who couldn't get into a fraternity because they didn't have enough cash. They were also, a lot of them were African American, because at that time the fraternities were segregated. So they couldn't get into fraternities. So all the African Americans at our school were independents. And so we kind of banded all together. So all my friends in college, despite the fact that it was an elite college with all these wealthy people in it, all my friends were just like me. Pretty much. Some of them were African American, so they had darker complexions than I did. But they were just like me. So I ran around with. See, that's what you got to do, Jeff. You got to partner with people that are just like you are, not try to, I don't know, wander around with wealthy people. Okay, unless you've got a lot of money. Your dad was enlisted, so I'm guessing that's not what happened. As I remember, I wasn't making that much money. Okay. There is a clear relation between the absolute wealth of a nation and the average life expectancy of its citizens. This is true up to a gross domestic product per capita figure of approximately $30,000. Where are we? We're at $48,000 in the United States. So we can follow this thing down right to Korea. Anything below Korea, and those people are suffering. And yeah, exactly. So as we look at this, we see Norway and Singapore, then the United States is the next wealthiest country, the Netherlands, Ireland, Canada, Australia, Germany, Belgium, the UK, France, Japan, Italy, Spain, Korea, and then we get below $30,000 per year. And those are the individuals that are suffering, as confusing as all that is. Okay, so what are we going to see? We're going to see about the same health level of health for the group of people that are above $30,000, but we're going to see poorer health in the people that are below, and that includes Greece and Russia. Above the per capita gross domestic product, $30,000, the curve largely flattens out, suggesting very little relation between absolute wealth and life expectancy. So you can have millions and millions of dollars, really doesn't make any difference. You're still going to, the average, the life expectancy is going to be about the same. Many of the countries in the flat part of the curve have above average incomes that are lower than that of the lowest Americans. Yet these people don't seem to be worse off in terms of health outcomes. So despite the fact that all the people in the United States, we can look at all the people in the United States, our life expectancy is about the same as it is for this select group of individuals, even though they make less money than we do. Now this gets kind of interesting because if we look at the reservations, if we look at Fort Belknap, for example, Fort Belknap, the average yearly income is only about $9,000. So you can imagine the health care on Fort Belknap is relatively poor. And if we look at the life expectancy of the people, of the natives that live in Blaine County, the life expectancy is only 60. For the white population, where their wealth is much higher, their life expectancy is 88. That's 28 years difference between the guys on Fort Belknap and the guys that live off the reservation. Well, not the guys that live off the reservation, the white people that live off the reservation, because there are a lot of natives that live off the reservation. Poor Americans are doing far worse than wealthier Americans. Income and health is actually a relationship between health and one's income relative to those around you. So when you live in a neighborhood, you are actually selecting a place that you're going to be comparing yourself to. And if you are the poor guy living in the neighborhood, in other words, you're only making $100,000 a year and everybody else is making $150,000 or $200,000 a year, then your health is going to be worse, despite the fact that if you move to another neighborhood, you would be one of the wealthiest people in the neighborhood. And in that case, your health would be much, much better. But what we do is we compare ourselves to the people around us. So if you live on the reservation, on Fort Belknap, where the average income is $9,000, average yearly income, then potentially if I make $35,000, which is about the amount of money I made when I was there, I was living pretty good. I was doing okay compared to the individuals that were struggling. Indians living in a poor province of Kerala have far lower absolute incomes than poor African Americans in the United States. However, people in Kerala outlive African Americans by a substantial degree. The Keralians are poor in absolute terms, but they likely feel less poor because nearly everyone around them is poor. And for that reason, of course, they do much, much better, as confusing as that may be. So it's not who you are, and it's where you are and who your friends are. Who are the people that you interact with? Now, it's really kind of interesting because when I grew up, I grew up in an area outside of Muncie, outside of the city. And my dad had to go to work every day. And when he went to work, he worked in a bank. So he was around a lot of people with a lot of money. So my dad kind of suffered from that. But the rest of us, of course, we were living on a farm in rural Delaware County, and we didn't suffer from it at all because all the other farmers around us, they had much less than we did. But my dad, he saw this every day, and for that reason, he had more health issues than the rest of us did. All of his kids, we never got sick, but my dad did, and my mom didn't get sick. Why? Well, she didn't interact with those wealthy people in Muncie, but my dad had to because he worked at a bank. Poor Americans often earn an income that is not that poor by international standards. However, they are poor compared to their fellow Americans, and their health suffers accordingly. This is one of the things that's going to happen to Jeff. He's going to move to Phoenix. Here, it doesn't take a whole lot of money to be okay. When you get to Phoenix, I know, Burger King's going to be more expensive. What? Really? Popeye's chicken is going to be more expensive. It's going to cost you a lot more money for gasoline. Gas is far more expensive in Phoenix than it is in Chinle or up here on the corner. Sorry. So one of the things you're going to discover is that you're going to have a lot less money than you had before, despite the fact that you're working and you have all this stuff coming in. The other thing you're going to discover is the ASU is going to charge you a lot more money than Dene College is. Yeah.
Okay, change your mind.
Oh, no.
No, he's got to do what he's got to do. That's okay.
Well, it'll work out somehow. We'll make it work.
Yeah, I'm sure everything's going to work out. You've already figured all this stuff out anyway.
Yeah,
Okay. But the difference is going to be that you're going to have less money.
twice as much as here.
Yeah. I'm going to move this a little forward. And I appreciate you putting that
Yeah,
thing
well,
down. There we go. Okay. Disadvantaged minorities.
Sorry.
Thanks, Jeff. You just screwed it up.
Sorry.
Oh, you need some gum. Okay, well that's fine.
Sorry.
But that's the last piece of gum you get. Okay. Disadvantaged minorities around the world tend to be of lower socioeconomic status, and they often experience worse health outcomes than those of majority members. In particular, African Americans in the United States suffer from relatively worse health outcomes. Now, why in the world would African Americans suffer more than Hispanics, or than American Indians, or than Asians, or than anybody? Why African Americans? What is the problem with African Americans? Are they just naturally unhealthy? Wait a minute. Practically everybody in the NBA is African American. A large majority of people that play professional football are African American. What is it about African Americans that gives them a problem? What's going on in the United States that African Americans have more trouble than American Indians? Now, if you think about it, you guys owned everything, and we took it away from you, so you should be pissed off at us. White people, I mean. Okay. So you should have the worst health care. You should have the worst health outcomes. Or take Hispanics. This is a president that wants to build a wall and keep all those Hispanics out. He doesn't know the difference between somebody that's been here longer than all the other Europeans than everybody else. If you were Hispanic, you would feel like this president wants to kick you out of the country. So they should have bad health outcomes, but they don't. What is going on with African Americans?
Maybe less opportunities to get.
Well, in the South, they certainly do. I don't know, and to a degree, in the North, it's not as bad as it is in the South. Texas, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. Hispanics have a hard time in Texas.
Especially during the boarding between Mexico and Texas.
Texans hate everybody. They don't like black people, they don't like Hispanics, they don't like natives. They try to kill all the natives. Well, this was 100 years ago, but they did. This is the weirdest thing in the world. I saw a station in Texas 4 times, and every time I went to Texas, and if I mentioned anything about American Indians, they go, "Oh, don't mention Indians to me, Indians to me. They scalped my great uncle. Them damn Comanches scalped my great uncle." Of course, they think all American Indians are Comanches. I know. Dumb as dirt. Texans, no offense to your relatives that live in Texas. Yeah, offense to them. I don't give a shit. Those sons of bitches, they're just dumb as dirt. So what's going on with African Americans? Why are they having so much trouble? I mean, look at all the singers. I mean, a lot of our entertainment comes from African Americans. Shouldn't that be a positive thing? I mean, how many of you listen to rap music? How many of you listen to powwow music?
Sometimes.
I got one person.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. 2 people listen. Well, there's only 4 of us in the room. I listen to powwow music too. Okay. But so what is it about African Americans?
Could it possibly be their skin color for the?
Exactly. Yeah, we know the difference between this lady and this guy. And we don't care that this guy is, I don't know what he is. Who knows what he is? He could be Hispanic. He could be native.
Or Italian.
He could be Italian. He could be Armenian. He could be anything. But we know that she's African American. We know that she's African American. We know that he's African American. We know she's African American. So if you're Hispanic, potentially people think that you're something else.
I have a Panama friend that got,
Panamanian.
she looks black, but she's actually a Panamanian. She's actually Hispanic. And
She's African ancestry.
yeah. Oh. Oh, huh.
Okay.
Never mind.
Okay.
Never mind.
Okay. I know. In Panama, it doesn't matter. In Brazil, it doesn't matter. You can be, you can look like a black African, somebody who's very, very dark, and nobody cares. But in the United States, it's huge, it's massive, it's gigantic. Tonight, I don't think, maybe not tonight, I think they have some kind of a special on something about naked women running around in Shanghai. Women in their underwear running around. Victoria's Secret has something on tonight.
That's tonight. I thought we were talking about some sort of pageant.
No, it's Victoria's Secret in Shanghai tonight. So, but it's on the channel that I normally watch, NCIS New Orleans. It's really interesting because there's a white guy on NCIS New Orleans, and there's a black lady on NCIS New Orleans, and it looked like they were going to get together. They were going to hook up. It looked like that was going to happen. There's been so much backlash over that possibility that the writers have gone gone neutral with that whole relationship. I know. So what difference does it make? It's a television show. It's a fantasy. Well, it isn't. It's huge in the United States. So race is gigantic in the United States. But only these races, only that race is the worst, or gets the most impact. Saying it's the worst is not really fair. But they have the most impact from the fact that they are different. Looking at the 15 leading causes of death in the United States, African Americans have higher death rates than that of European Americans for 12 of them. 12 of them. Are they unhealthy? Are these wimpy people? Is that what's going on? No, most of our major athletes are African American. So what's the deal? Well, it probably has something to do with discrimination. African Americans tend to be of much lower socioeconomic status than the European Americans. Many of the reasons for their higher mortality can be explained by the socioeconomic status difference between the European Americans and African Americans. The only three diseases that European Americans suffer from more than African Americans is respiratory diseases, COPD, smoking, cigarettes. Really? Yes. African Americans don't smoke nearly as much as European Americans do. And one of the worst states is Oklahoma. And another one is Arkansas. And another one is Texas. So right there in that big pot. Alzheimer's disease, they suffer from Alzheimer's disease more. Why? They live longer. The longer you live, the more likely you'll come down with Alzheimer's disease and suicide. As odd as that may seem. Suicide. Infant mortality rates among African Americans are about double that of European Americans, and these differences also hold for those African Americans who are highly educated. So despite the fact that you've got a lot of money and you've got a higher education, it still doesn't correct this. You would think if socioeconomic status has everything to do with it, then you would think that all you would need to do would be to gain money and gain status and gain education. And you would not have to worry about your child dying, your baby dying. But the reality is that's not true. It's just not the way it works. Hypertension is especially high among African American men, and unlike other health outcomes, hypertension rates are slightly higher for African American men with college degrees than they are for African American men with less education. The opposite holds true for African American women and for European American men and women. Wait a minute. So the more education they have, the more hypertension they have. That's the opposite of the way it is for white people, as confusing as that is. And it's the opposite of the way it is for women. African American women. So what is it about African American men that gives them so much hypertension? Obviously, it's the rap music. I'm kidding. It doesn't.
Is it the stress?
It is the
The
stress.
stress from their work and having to work more harder?
It's the stress from the discrimination
Oh,
that they see. And if you've ever had a friend who is African American, and you talk to them about it, they see micro incidences of discrimination in somebody's look, in somebody's demeanor. This is a constant with them, for them. And this is very stressful. And of course, the more stress they're under, the more they will are likely to react to that stress with a reduced immune response. Does all that make sense? I know this is a tragedy. There's not a whole hell of a lot we can do about it, except change the way that we portray them on television, so people maybe, and this is what has happened over the last 40 or 50 years. I remember when we had the very first African American television star. If you watched a television show and there was an African American in the show, then they were not portrayed positively. But the very first one was Bill Cosby. As sad as that is, since he's done what he's done and was doing what he was doing. Anyway, really a tragedy. So we can try to change the way that we see things, the way that we see people. We can change that if we can change it in our own minds, maybe the response in the future will change. Maybe we can make sure that our children don't see these things as negative. Maybe we can stop using the N-word. That would be nice if we could do that. I know, it's just a tragedy. There were like 15 African Americans in my college class. How many of them do you think are still alive? Of those 15 people? Take a guess. 15. I set a college record. I was on the 400-meter relay team, and we broke the record. One of the guys was African American. Healthy, football player, big, strong, great big thighs. This guy was fast, certainly faster than I was. He's dead.
so
He was younger than me. Out of 15 people, only 2 people are still alive.
so okay.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of dead people. Out of my class, there was a class of 250 people, and there's probably 50 people that are dead, or 13 of them are African American. I know that's tragic. But of course, this was during civil rights. This is back in the 60s. We graduated in 71. So these kids suffered through all of that trauma. And there's only two of them that are still alive. One of them was a parole officer, and he worked at a prison. And the other one developed schizophrenia in his middle 20s. And he's still alive. And they're the only 2 that are still alive. There were 3 of them that were gay, and they died of AIDS like 10 years after we graduated from college. Really sad situation. The epidemiological paradox does not apply equally to all. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't talk about Latinos, did I? Compared to European Americans, Latinos tend to have lower mortality rates for 10 of the 15 leading causes of death. This is one of the oddities of the Latino culture. There's something about the culture that is very positive. It's far more positive than it is for European Americans. This ethnic difference is all the more puzzling because Latinos tend to be of lower socioeconomic status than the European Americans, and they hence should be expected to suffer worse health outcomes. And this is known as an epidemiological paradox. So if you want to live for a long time, then you need to embrace your Hispanic heritage. It works. I don't have any Hispanic heritage, but I still try to embrace it every chance I get. I try to speak Spanish. Maybe it's the Spanish that makes you live for a long time. And the group that lives longest are Latinas, are females. So when I grow up, I want to be a Hispanic female. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I'm guessing it's not going to happen. I want to live for a long time, okay? The epidemiological paradox, interestingly, does not apply equally to all groups of Latinos. Puerto Ricans do not show some of the same unexplained health benefits as Mexicans, and there are no explanations as to why. So if we look at different groups of Latinos from different areas, people from Venezuela, people from Nicaragua, people from Guatemala. I once played at a soccer game against a group of Guatemalans. These little guys, they were like 5 feet tall, 5'2", and here we are. I'm 5'6", so I felt like a monster, playing against these guys. They ran circles around me. I was a nationally ranked sprinter when I was in college, and these guys ran circles around me. They kicked the crap out of us. We had some big, huge, great big white guys on our team, and they got the shit kicked out of them by these little tiny Guatemalans. I'm complaining now, okay? I'm not bragging, I'm complaining. But it's really kind of interesting. The group of individuals that seems to live the longest are Mexicans, Mexican Americans, people of Mexican ancestry. Fascinating stuff. Where does this come from? Why is it occurring? And why don't the rest of the Latinos, why don't they have the same benefits as Mexican Americans? So I don't just want to be a Latina, I want to be a Mexican American, a Mexicana. That's not the right word. I can't think of the term. Anyway, a female Mexican. Okay. Now, not all Hispanics benefit. The longer they've been in the United States, the more their health suffers. Latinos tend to be less likely to drink and smoke than non-Latinos, although they also tend to exercise less. The longer they have lived in the United States, the more likely they are to engage in unhealthy behaviors as they come to drink more, to smoke more, and are more likely to become obese. Now remember, we're talking about people from Mexico. We're talking about people from Guatemala. We're talking about people from Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Venezuela. We're talking about people from South America. The reality is, this was really kind of interesting. I was down in Peru in 2003. I went down there on a trip. It was fascinating because as we were wandering around Lima looking at people, I'm not saying that I was ogling the female population, but I was noticing people that lived there, and these people were relatively slender. Not just the females, but also the males. They didn't overeat like we do in the United States. It was really kind of fascinating. And then we went from Peru to Guatemala. And we saw exactly the same thing. We saw a Mayan population. Down in Peru, we saw a Quichua population. Okay, so yes, there were some native ancestry to this select group of this select population. We went to Guatemala, it was a Mayan population, relatively slender. Then we came back to the United States and it was like night and day. We saw some of the fattest people that we had ever seen before in our lives. We were shocked. And we had just been down in Guatemala and in Peru, and the people were relatively slender. And here we came back to the United States, and we immediately landed in Los Angeles. We had to stay the night in Los Angeles. And who did we run into? Everybody looked fat. Every single person looked like they were obese that we saw in Los Angeles. And as we went back to Montana I was I was working in Montana at the time, people still looked fat. And it's because Americans eat too much. We overeat. I don't know, can you read it?
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I can.
Some cultural factors are more pronounced among Latinos, such as high value placed on childbearing and a good deal of emotional support provided by the community seem to provide an important health buffer. And of course, they get a lot of support. It's more of a collectivist society. So you, especially the Mexican-American population. So we see a lot of benefit from the fact that they're making babies, they support their children. How do we do the same thing in the European Americans do the same thing in the United States? Do we put a high premium on childbirth and on taking care of families and taking care of? Hell no, we don't. And sometimes, especially if there's a lot of money in the family, there's a lot of conflict taking place because they're worried about inheriting a big pile of cash. As it were, they're hoping their brothers or sisters die so they get more money. Isn't that the way it works? They don't want anybody to have more kids because then that costs more money. We're all worried about money. Latinos derive health benefits from cultural scripts such as Simpatica and their unusually high levels of positive effect. They are very positive about life. They are very positive about family. Even if there is conflict, the conflict usually will go away relatively quickly. But of course, in the European American community, we see a lot of conflicts that will last for generations, into the next generation. People fighting each other and hating each other, despising each other. In traditional non-Western societies, beliefs in supernatural causes of illness are widespread. These range from the theories that aggressive spirits such as ghosts cause disease, which is the most widespread theory of disease around the world, that ghosts cause disease, to accounts of witchcraft, sorcery, mystical retributions, and sinful violations of taboos. And this is very common around the world. European Americans don't have the same, Europeans don't have the same ideas. But if we go to Africa, if we go to South America, we see this. If we go to Asia, we see this. So the vast majority of people around the world believe that disease is caused by ideas rather than by bacteria or whatnot. I want you to look at the eyes of these next two individuals. Concentrate on their eyes. Among the Azandi of West Africa, the primary cause of illness is attributed to witchcraft. Some Zandi are believed to be witches, and the source of their witchcraft is believed to be a small organ in their bodies which can be inherited from their parents. So you've got an organ in your body that makes you a witch. Everybody knows that. The Zandi witches do not perform any rites. They use any potions or cast any spells. Rather, witches conduct their witchcraft entirely through their minds. And I just showed you two pictures of Zandi. Look at their eyes. Isn't that interesting? They're almost hypnotizing, aren't they? I know, this is spooky, isn't it? I think I'm sick already. When a Zandi develops a slowly progressing illness, it is believed to be the result of a witch who is consuming the soul of its victim's organs a little bit at a time. When a Zandi develops a sudden acute illness, it is believed to be the result of a sorcerer casting a spell on them. And of course, in order for them to survive, they have to get a counter spell. Okay. That's fascinating. Okay. How much time? Okay. In traditional Chinese medicine, a healthy body is one in which the dialectical forces of yin and yang are in balance, harmony, hojo, balance. Get it? Okay. Yin and yang. Any imbalances are believed to be ultimately will lead to illnesses. So this is Chinese. We saw what happens with that one group in Africa, very relatively common. This is in China. The vast, well, they've got what, 1.2 billion people. A person who has liver fire will have symptoms such as headaches, flushed face, and anger, and this illness is believed to be caused by having too much yang and not enough yin. Nothing worse than having not enough yin. Such an imbalance can be corrected by acupuncture, herbal remedies, exercise, diet, and lifestyle. So you can regain your balance by living a healthy, by doing healthy things. As exciting as that is. Western doctors may disagree with one another, as strange as that may seem. There are rather striking differences between medical practices of French and American doctors. The French believe in a concept of terrain or balance. That sounds kind of like the Chinese, doesn't it? This emphasis on balance shifts drugs consumption away from the antibiotics and toward various tonics and vitamins that are believed to strengthen the immune system. So if you go to France and you're sick, the probability of them doing surgery is not very high, but they will probably give you something that will make you feel better. They'll give you a vitamin B tonic of some kind. What they're trying to do is build up your immune system. Long rests and spa visits are also viewed as an important part of the lifestyle that rejuvenates the terrain. Really kind of fascinating. If you go to Germany, the Germans get a 1 month off every year to rehabilitate or whatever. They get a month off every year. Every 5 years, they get to go to a spa for 2 months, and it's paid for by the government. They get their month off, and it's paid for by the government so that they can maintain a healthy lifestyle. And they'll go to these spas. There's these spas all over Germany. Mineral baths and whatnot. And the French do the same thing. So if you get sick in Germany, they're probably going to do something. They're going to treat you differently than you would be treated in the United States.
Like c'est la vie, right?
I'm sorry?
Like in French, c'est la vie.
C'est la vie. So is life. Hospital stays are relatively long in France, about double the length in the United States for the same procedures, to provide ample time for recuperation. I typed this into the computer, and this is one of the pictures that came out. They have people that come and make you laugh. They have clowns that wander through the hospitals.
What if you're afraid of clowns?
That's an American thing.
Oh.
It ain't a French thing.
Oh, okay.
Remember that they have the mimes. They have all those crazy mimes
Oh, yeah, that's
wandering around the streets, getting stuck in boxes and whatnot, pulling invisible ropes. Okay. Yeah, I know. This is really kind of interesting. So they have these people wandering through the hospital, just like the nurses wandering through the hospital, making people feel better. And sometimes they don't speak. They're like mimes. So they'll come in and they'll do things. They'll make all these wild gestures, trying to make you feel better. Okay, we need to stop right here. We'll pick this up next time. I'll finish this chapter and we'll get into the next chapter, fortunately or unfortunately. You can see it any way you like. Anyway.